So far, we introduced nDNA, the latent trajectory lens that turns weights into an interpretable belief geometry. With it, we read mod-level operations, alignment, collapse, merging, including heterogeneous marriages, distillation, quantization, and 3 kinds of pruning, attention heads, MLP channels, and full transformer layers by watching kappa, curvature, L, thermodynamic length, and the belief vector field change across depth. Then we stepped up to Neural Genomics, proposed the diagnostics kit, NHD, NGDI, NTEDS, and enkaryotyping, etc., that maps inheritance, dominance, divergence, plasticity, and cultural conflict as models evolve. But a paradigm-shifting idea like nDNA doesn't earn trust by promise, it earns it by proof. So, in this section, we put nDNA and Neural Genomics to work on core NLP tasks, showing, task by task, how a model's genome explains behavior, predicts failure, and guides repair. The punchline: we are not just tuning metrics, we are rewriting the DNA of natural language processing. Jeffrey Hinton, the godfather of AI, is warning us in simple terms: capability is compounding faster than our control. Opaque AI systems can gain autonomy and power-seeking behaviors faster than we can control them, turning into an existential risk.
From everything you know, everything you understand, is generative AI potentially an existential threat to the human species?
I think that's what I've been saying, yes. It really is an existential threat. Some people say this is just science fiction, and until fairly recently I believed it was a long way off. I always thought it would be a very long-term threat, but I thought it would be 100 years before we have really smart things. 50 years maybe. We have plenty of time to think about it. Now I think it's quite likely that sometime in the next 20 years, these things will get smarter than us, and we really need to worry about what happens then.
It is realized that existential risk is indeed proportional to emerging behaviors, because each new capability expands a model's action space, reduces predictability, and lets small errors compound across chains of skills. As these opaque, composable abilities stack, they create sudden jumps in power and autonomy that outpace our controls. As behaviors become more emergent and unexplained, the existential risk curve steepens. Watch this short clip for a quick recap of emerging abilities, not only in language models, but also in physics, chemistry, and biology. History shows that when explanations fail, we dig deeper and build better principles. So we need tools that trace the evolution of artificial cognition, measure it early, and add caps and deployment gates until we can explain it and steer it. nDNA and Neural Genomics are built to do exactly that.
Imagine a growing child who's unable to draw coherent pictures. As he grows, his brain smoothly increases in size and his fine motor skills smoothly improve, but he's still unable to draw coherent pictures. However, upon hitting a certain critical age, we observe a discontinuous jump in his ability to draw. This jump renders the child suddenly able to draw incredible portraits, despite the fact that his fine motor skills show gradual improvement. In recent years, we've seen LLMs exhibit this exact behavior. As LLMs get bigger, we find that there are critical scales at which they're suddenly able to complete tasks like translation, summarization, and code completion without being trained to do these tasks. These abilities are called emergent abilities, emerging at a particular scale. Let's take a closer look at emergence in LLMs now. Scaling is the process of making a model bigger. In general, this means training a model with more parameters on more data with more compute. Scaling language models has demonstrated consistent, predictable improvements to performance, with the scaling law for the cross-entropy loss of language models holding at more than 7 orders of magnitude. In other words, the performance of language models on their training objective improves steadily with scale. As we've noted above, this behavior is in contrast to the emergent abilities of LLMs, which are not directly trained for and which rapidly appear. Let's take a look at one such ability now through the emoji movie task. Emoji movie is a task in the Big Benchmark, or Big Bench, in which a sequence of emojis describes a movie, and the task is to guess the movie given the emoji sequence. For example, this sequence represents Finding Nemo, and this sequence represents The Incredibles. Here we can see the performance of the LLM Big G on Emoji Movie at different scales. As we can see, the model performs quite poorly across scales, which is perhaps unsurprising. After all, a language model is simply a probability distribution over token sequences, and the task requires the string Finding Nemo be the most probable one that should follow the string "What does this emoji describe?" followed by the Unicode string for the corresponding emoji sequence above. Nevertheless, the model appears to be getting slightly better as it scales. If we extrapolate using just the last few scales, we might expect something like this graph, where the solid lines are the extrapolations. However, what we actually find is this. After crossing an apparent critical value between the 10th and 11th orders of magnitude, the model seems to be catapulted into a new regime in which it can complete this fairly complicated task with drastically increased accuracy. And it's not just Emoji Movie. Many other tasks in Big Bench have been shown to exhibit similar behavior. Somewhat mysteriously, All of these abilities emerge at a similar scale, despite being relatively unrelated, at least at a first glance. The important part about this phenomenon is that we, a priori, don't know that this will happen in advance, or even at what scale it might happen. Let's take a look at the explanation of multi-step reasoning now. One of the simplest explanations is that LLMs display emergent abilities because of what we're actually measuring. If LLMs get better at elementary reasoning with scale, these smooth improvements could lead to highly nonlinear observations on more complicated tasks. If the complex tasks that we're measuring performance on can be cast as a reasoning chain that must be fully intact to measure a success, then unseen incremental improvements to reasoning ability will lead to huge performance jumps on these tasks. For example, if our LLM has a probability p of getting one step in a reasoning chain correct, then the probability of getting k steps correct is given by the binomial distribution, assuming independence for simplicity. This graph shows the probability on the y-axis of getting at least k steps right on the x-axis in a 10-step problem, varying as a function of p. Therefore, the probability of actually solving the problem is given by the probability of the last point, where x equals 10, colored in red for differentiation. Even with a very high probability of individual step success, the probability of completing the chain, and therefore solving the problem, remains quite low. If we plot the probability of total chain success as a function of p, we can see how smoothly increasing p leads to a rapid increase in the probability of solving the problem, appearing to emerge at a particular point. Importantly, this curve only becomes sharper as the number of steps in the reasoning chain is increased, so we would expect rapid emergence for more complicated problems if multi-step reasoning is in fact an explanatory factor. Note that this is a toy model, and we haven't defined what it means to reason, nor implied how we might smoothly measure an LLM's ability to generate responses that align with reasoned answers. This example is just to provide some intuition that small changes to elementary abilities may have a drastic cascade of effects observed in the LLM's ability to solve more complicated problems. The fact that LLMs gain these abilities at all as they scale is remarkable, but it's the manner in which they gain these abilities that's especially interesting. In particular, many abilities of large language models appear to be emergent, meaning that the models will go from near zero performance to sometimes state-of-the-art performance at incredibly rapid paces and at unpredictable scales. To see why this is such a big deal, let's consider emergence as a general concept. Emergent behavior is not unique to LLMs, and it's actually seen in many fields, like physics, evolutionary biology, economics, and dynamical systems. While there's not a single definition of emergence that's used across domains, all definitions boil down to the same essential phenomenon of small changes to the quantitative parameters of a system making large changes to its qualitative behavior. To illustrate this idea, let's take an example from physics. Consider water in the liquid phase, where the behavior of the system is governed by fluid dynamics. As the temperature of the water is steadily decreased, the specifics about how the system behaves may change, like increased viscosity, but overall, the qualitative behavior is the same and is described by fluid mechanics. If the temperature continues to be steadily decreased, however, you will eventually hit a critical temperature at which the behavior of the system changes drastically. The water will enter the solid phase, ice, undergoing a phase transition that completely changes the rules of the game. Suddenly, the system is no longer obeying fluid mechanics, but solid-state mechanics, entering a new regime in which the laws governing the system's behavior change in a qualitative way. It's important to note that this change of behaviors occurs in a discontinuous way with respect to temperature. As the temperature is steadily attenuated, the behavior of the system changes abruptly upon crossing the critical threshold. While we may take the process of ice freezing for granted because it's so pedestrian to us as humans, it's quite a remarkable phenomenon that has tremendous implications and applications in more exotic domains. Many of you will remember the news from earlier this year when researchers thought they discovered a new superconductor, LK99. Superconductivity is a great example of emergent behavior, and it happens because the electrons in superconductors exhibit very special behavior below a certain critical temperature. These emergent phenomena are huge areas of research, and superconductivity may pave the way to quantum computation, fusion, and other technologies. Now that we have a better idea of why emergence is so special in general, the question then becomes, why don't we do this scaling? Just as we build larger and larger particle colliders in physics with the purposes of finding new particles, why don't we build larger and larger language models in search of new emergent abilities? The Large Hadron Collider alone cost almost $5 billion, which is multiple times more than the total initial investment into OpenAI. And the Large Hadron Collider was not built with practical applications in mind. Why have we not put this investment in for a technology that has huge transformative potential? There are several reasons, but training data limitations is a significant blocker at this point. The human species as a whole simply just doesn't have enough usable data at this point to train such large models. But what does this all mean, and where do we go from here? In short, at this point, it's unclear. There are three important things to keep in mind about the emergent abilities of LLMs. 1, we don't know at what scale they'll appear. 2, we don't know the level of ability until they do appear. And 3, we don't even know the landscape of potential emergent abilities. The observation of emergent abilities in LLMs is an interesting development. More studies into this phenomenon are needed to form a more complete understanding of what's actually going on. Ultimately, even if there are potentially simple factors that contribute to explanations for apparent emergent abilities, the fact that they exist at all is an exciting development. After all, we as humans care less about continuous performance curves than we do how AI can impact our lives. What other abilities might lay as yet undiscovered?
In this section, we put nDNA and Neural Genomics to work across 5 core NLP case studies. GenomeMT is a framework for explaining and predicting zero-shot machine translation quality from the model's internal geometry. It reads the model through the lens of Neural Genomics and nDNA and treats cross-lingual transfer as a geometric traversal between two language manifolds. We call it total epistemic effort. Each language expresses a distinct neural genome, its own pattern of curvature, path length, and belief field steering across layers. Translating is then a kind of semantic gene editing, splicing, realigning, and recombining latent sequences so that meanings land on the target manifold with minimal twist and minimal effort. GenomeMT measures exactly that twist and effort, giving an interpretable, reference-free proxy for transfer complexity. It shows strong, stable correlations with BLUE, COMET, and CHRF, even in extreme zero-resource regimes. The score is model-agnostic, cheap to compute, and consistent across prompts. In the next chapter, we discuss adversarial attacks. LLMs are increasingly susceptible to adversarial prompts, crafted inputs that bypass alignment constraints while inducing unsafe, policy-violating behavior. Rather than viewing these attacks as input-level corruptions, we reframe them as instances of latent semantic infection, perturbations that hijack the model's internal belief trajectories across layers, encoded in its neural DNA. We demonstrate that attacks such as prompt injection, suffix hijacking, backdoor activation, role impersonation, recursive caught exploits, and goal drift can be interpreted as cases of semantic vector torsion, where inputs induce misalignment without violating superficial safety constraints. These adversarial torsions divert belief flows deep within the model, compromising generation without triggering refusal filters. Motivated by virology and immunology, we construct a taxonomy of semantic infections, each mapped to a distinct failure mode in the nDNA manifold. To counter these infections, we propose a defense framework grounded in cognitive immunology. Viral introduces 11 targeted vaccines, modular, interpretable, and composable defenses against specific attack types. These include splicer, prompt injection, sentry, suffix hijacking, dormiguard, backdoor triggers, cascadex, multi-turn jailbreaks, EMBERGENT, embedding space distortion, roll stop, role impersonation, replicate, recursive reasoning loops, promptx, prompt leakage, drift shield, goal hijacking, chain lock, prompt recombination, and reflexia, self-induced jailbreaks. Then we introduce Orbit, a neural genomics framework for diagnosing the epistemic health of large language models in multi-turn dialogue. While prior evaluation methods emphasize surface-level fluency or factuality, Orbit ventures deeper, probing the latent evolution of beliefs by modeling internal representations as semantic trajectories through high-dimensional latent space. Grounded in a novel neural DNA formalism, denoted, we extract turn-wise belief vectors and apply tools from differential geometry, curvature, torsion, and thermodynamic semantic length to characterize how a model thinks, transitions, and stabilizes during conversation. We introduce new diagnostic metrics, interturn angular deviation, epistemic torsion, and cumulative drift to quantify alignment-related phenomena such as memory retention, reasoning consistency, and semantic derailment. Empirical results across state-of-the-art LLMs such as Llama, Mistral, Gemma reveal that stronger models trace smooth, low-torsion nDNA trajectories with compact belief loops, while weaker models exhibit jagged, high-curvature pathways with epistemic volatility. Orbit achieves superior correlation with human judgments on coherence, consistency, and engagement, surpassing existing metrics like BLUE-RT, GEVAL, and more. Then we discuss SCAR, stands for Spectral Contamination and Alignment Rupture, a novel diagnostic framework that identifies and quantifies data contamination through the lens of latent geometry and epistemic dynamics. SCAR analyzes three complementary signals across transformer layers, spectral curvature, thermodynamic length, and belief vector field drift, to construct a unified representation of model behavior. Clean models exhibit smooth, stable nDNA trajectories reflecting robust reasoning effort and internal consistency, while contaminated models manifest sharp geometric ruptures and shortcut patterns, even when outputs appear fluent and aligned. To operationalize this framework, we propose SCAR score metric and we curate SCARbench, a benchmark suite of pre-training and fine-tuning contamination scenarios across LLM families, including adversarial leaks, benchmark injections, and alignment simulation artifacts. Our experiments show that SCAR reliably detects contamination signatures that remain invisible to conventional metrics. The SCAR framework draws deep conceptual motivation from biological systems, where genomic integrity and regulatory balance are crucial for healthy function. Just as the overexpression of a single gene can lead to cancer or autoimmune disorders, contamination in LLMs causes the overactivation of memorized latent pathways, bypassing robust reasoning. By treating layer-ways activations as a form of neural genomics, SCAR enables the detection of such epistemic mutations, offering a path toward more trustworthy and safe AI. The last chapter in this section is NEFOS, stands for Neural Poisoning through Heuristic Override and Seeding. As large language models ingest massive, uncurated web corpora during pre-training, they inherit not just factual knowledge but also the implicit vulnerabilities of their data sources. We uncover a novel and insidious threat vector, latent conceptual poisoning, where adversaries embed warped, adversarially tilted concepts into training data without relying on overt lexical patterns or duplications. We formalize this attack as stealth pre-training seeding, SPS, a subtle mechanism wherein maliciously crafted data implants epistemic landmines that remain dormant during typical evaluation but can be selectively activated via specific prompts. Crucially, these latent poisons distort the model's internal belief geometry, leading to unsafe completions, brittle reasoning, and alignment drift, all while evading detection by conventional token-based filters. Drawing inspiration from permafrost phenomena of biology, where silent genetic mutations catalyze malignant cascades. With the increasing global warming, scientists uncover a new phenomena called permafrost. When the Arctic ice melts, releasing water, carbon, and even long dormant microbes, those were dormant for million years. These microbes reawaken, travel through meltwater, and interact with wildlife and immediately start action and start mutations. Like permafrost releasing long dormant microbes when the climate warms, NEFOS shows how stealth pre-training seeding can freeze adversarial concepts inside a model's latent geometry, quite during benchmarks, then activated by the right prompts. Our experiments reveal that even minimal semantic infiltration during pre-training can lead to profound alignment ruptures during inference, compromising safety, reliability, and generalization. This work not only surfaces a previously underexplored threat model for foundation models, but also lays the groundwork for next-generation cybersecurity defenses centered on latent space auditing, conceptual immunization, and proactive epistemic hygiene. Together, these studies show how reading the model's genome explains behavior, predicts failure, and guides precise fixes, rewriting the DNA of natural language processing.